So again, you are very welcome to this Digital Challenges and Opportunities for Community Adult Educators. This is brought to you by both EPALE Ireland and EPALE UK. And just some technical information. This webinar is going to be recorded. So if you do happen to have any kind of technical hitches, audio, anything like that, you will be able to re-watch if you need to. For the sound quality, we are hoping that everyone can stay on mute, unless of course you are speaking and you are able to unmute yourself at that point. If you look into the control panel, there is all of the attendees and you can find yourself and unmute yourself if you need to chat. The questions, feedback, comments can be popped into the questions box, which you can see here. Everything has a little drop-down menu. So when it comes to looking for yourself in the attendees list or audio or questions, you just find the name of it, you can pop it down, and that's where you'll be able to ask your questions. And we are going to have a couple of polls that come up. You'll see them on your screen, and hopefully they will go off without any hitches. So the agenda for today, the welcome, which is right now, we have our two case study speakers, Pamela and Allison. We're going to have some time for discussion, and then both of our speakers, David and Joe, will come on, followed by Q&A, and then our next steps and close. So in case you didn't know, EPALE is the electronic platform for adult learning in Europe. It's a free multilingual online community for those working in the adult learning community. It's funded by the European Commission, and it's an online resource of adult learning material providing content, and it supports those in the adult learning sector. It encourages those working in the sector to network and form meaningful connections, and it's really a wonderful source for collaborating and, as I said, for connecting. The EPALE has the central support service who manages everything really, and then we have our national support services. So for me, I am in Ireland, and my colleagues Colin and Rafna and Sarah in the UK. So the national support service is responsible for the promotion, for bringing all of the great resources and content to yourselves. And that's just a brief overview of both of those sectors. Okay, sorry, it's saying I'm having some connection issues, so just give me 1 second. Okay, so the most evident value that EPALE brings is the content, and that includes the blog posts, it includes news, resources, and in addition, the platform hosts online discussions, and those discussions are on issues and topics within the sector. If you haven't had a chance to participate or see some of these online discussions, we invite you to do so because they really are quite brilliant, thought-provoking. We have the event calendar, which self-explanatory, but it's a great tool for users to not only find events to attend, but also to promote. So if you have things that are going on, it helps you to reach a wider audience. There's the partner search tool, which is one of my favorites because it allows users to find project partners and really build a transnational network. EPALE also hosts the policy tool, which brings together existing data on adult learning, and it provides a point of reference for monitoring performance and policy developments. Many of you might also be familiar with communities of practice, and it's online group allow you to meet like-minded EPALE members from across Europe and exchange ideas, resources, and good practices. So it goes back to that whole connecting, collaborating, and innovating. And collaborative spaces is closed and secure groups that allows users to discuss their ongoing projects and partnerships and their networks. And finally, we have the alternative learning resource, which is in the form of a podcast. And that platform allows users to learn more about adult education in Europe, not only by reading about it or by speaking to others about it, but by listening, which podcasts are really, they can be quite interesting to listen to. So again, we invite you to use all of these tools and to network, collaborate, and of course, innovate. Finally, EPALE has themes that occur quarterly. We have already went through Q1, which is environmental awareness and protection. At the moment, we're in Q2, which is digital skills as a way of accessing learning opportunities. So of course, this workshop fits quite well in there, but I think all of us have found that for 2020, digital skills is something that will be quite integral in probably every quarter. But the upcoming quarters are, or the upcoming focuses for the quarters are basic skills learning provision, and in Q4, social inclusion of the aging population and intergenerational learning. So again, if you have anything that comes up that is part of these themes, we invite you to share. And also if you're interested in anything that's coming up in these themes, EPALE is a great source for you to go ahead and look at. So we are going to go on to a poll, basically just like this slide has said, asking if you have registered yet on EPALE. So please do take the time to answer. Perfect. Poll's going, going, going. Almost there. More than half have answered. Nearly there. Perfect. So it looks like 59% have registered, and we have about 41 who, or exactly 41 who haven't. So those who haven't, you are very welcome. Okay, so thank you so much. I am going to pass it over to our first speaker, Pamela. So if you bear with me one moment, I am going to pass it over, and thank you very much. Okay.
Okay, good afternoon. I'm hoping you can see a full screen. My name is Pamela Latimer. I work with Longford Women's Inc. and I'm delighted with this opportunity today to talk a little bit about the challenges we had recently with converting everything over to deal with the COVID crisis. So Longford Women's Inc. we're based in County Longford. We're in the town of Longford. And we're an organisation. I'll give you a background of what it is we do and sort of our approach to education and all the services that we would offer. So the vision of Longford Women's Inc. is to so that women in Longford can fulfil their potential in a safe and equal society. Now, I would say we are Longford Women's Inc. However, everybody comes to us. So we work with men, women, and we work quite a lot with children as well. So our business model would be, we are a social enterprise, and we also operate as not-for-profit. So anything that we do, all our activities, they are designed to have a social impact. We are all our income generated, it would go back into our organisation as well. We employ approximately 100 people. Now, 50 of those are our community employment staff who are in training and in work, and that's funded through the Department of Social Protection. The turnover of approximately 2.2 million per year. And again, the majority of that would be restricted income. We do generate income through services and some fundraising, and that's what gives us the leeway. There are certain wages and running costs that we can put that towards. And our primary objective is to link women with the resources that they can avail of and use to improve and sometimes transform their lives. And the area that I work in is education. So as you can imagine, education gives people the opportunities to, it opens up doors, it gives them a lot more choices in life. And our aim is to make education accessible, both physically and financially for them. So we seek to achieve our goal by providing direct support to individuals. So we have a domestic violence victim support team. We offer counselling, support for migrant women, and there is a community childcare facility on site. And there's also a mobile childcare. So if there's an event or training going on off site, we are able to support people with that. We make our education as affordable as possible. So that's again building community capacity and giving people the opportunities to get themselves financially independent and sort of work towards having good career prospects and as well, and that has the impact right the way through the whole family setting. We would also be involved in lobbying and advocacy. So, you know, we would work a lot with government departments, and we are very much into getting women involved in decision making, local government level, all that sort of thing as well. And then our management team will be on various boards. Tara, who's the Deputy CEO, she's the chairperson of AINFIS at the moment. I would be heavily involved with the CEN network, Community Education Network. I'm also on the RPL practitioner board for Ireland as well. So, you know, we integrate ourselves as much as possible in order to bring services to back into our environment. So you can see here, I suppose just an idea is the individual comes through the door to us, we will listen to them and we will link and enable them to move forward. And that could be through our own services, or it could be to move them out into another organisation that might be better suited to them. So it's all about the learner is at the core of everything that we do and enabling them to move forward. In 2011, we built a dedicated training facility on site, and that's a wee photograph of it there. So unfortunately, it is firmly locked up at the moment, and we would love to see it active again. And it is very, very busy. We are offering everything from, I suppose, interest level right up to degree, and today we started launching recruiting students for a master's program as well. So, you know, we're very ambitious and we want to make education as accessible as possible. So COVID, of course, hit us at the beginning of this year, and that had a detrimental effect to everything that was going on. We have learners who are working towards, some who are working towards their degree, some who are working towards getting their major award, be it at level 5 or 6. And obviously we wanted to ensure that they had a continuation of service and that they could continue to focus on their studies. So we managed to get our learners online using Zoom. Now, we did get some advice on it, and we looked at many options. There was a lot of learning involved. We are a classroom-based provider, so it was a huge impact on our organisation. And our learners are very much, they're used to coming into us. Our tutors are very much used to being in a classroom, seeing their faces, you know, going through the class plan, talking to learners individually, then possibly at breaks, and then at one-to-one meetings and different things. So there was an awful lot of contact that we had lost as a result of this whole COVID crisis. So we decided to move towards Zoom to deliver class. And We then want to see how that was progressing. So we surveyed 40 of our learners to see how they were managing with it. Now, Longford, it's a market town in the Midlands of Ireland. So the town, we realised then from that survey, it was an interesting task for us to carry out. The majority of our learners are actually coming from rural settings. Longford would have a very poor reputation for broadband and all that type of thing. So that was a challenge that we would have to deal with. So we can see here that town, about a quarter of our learners are based in Longford town. There are 3 other major towns in the county. Again, another quarter approximately there, some villages, but the majority are sitting in rural settings. We found that most of our learners had the ability to get online and had internet access, which was terrific. I suppose there can be a perception that there is a challenge, and there is a challenge, but there can be a perception that it is much worse, the whole online and the broadband issue in rural Ireland. But you know, it actually surprised us, some of the information that we got back. So the report was basically they had 47% had reliable broadband, 29% not reliable, but still manageable, and the remaining group they considered to be quite poor. Now, I would say in this, we managed to get all our learners online, so you know, no one was left behind. We also looked at the employment status and how the impact of COVID affected our learners. Majority of our learners would be in the childcare sector. So you can see from that then, the majority there, that large blue area, that they could not do their job from home. So they were permanently at home. We had one learner who was considered to be an essential worker and was continuing to work. We had 18% not employed, another cohort who are at home, so that was approximately 10%, and then we had a small number, another 10%, who continued to work. So online learning during, they were asked if there were any specific issues, and most of them said they had no problem. Now, some of the answers we got back, I suppose, had we done the survey again, we would rephrase some of the questions, and based on that was based on the feedback we got and the amount of work that we did with our learners to get them up and running. So half the learners reported that they had no problems. Some of them had technical, a quarter said they had technical issues, but with our help they managed to get them resolved. Now, when I say we helped learners to the extent that we were helping them talk to their broadband providers, and we actually found that some of the areas had faults on their lines. That was addressed. I had, you know, it was some of the stories were quite interesting. People who thought they didn't have broadband in their home, but they did. So, you know, there was an awful lot of things that we had to just work through. We had learners who felt that they weren't particularly savvy. And again, we realised maybe there were children in the house who were great. So there were 10-year-olds helping their parents get up and running with this. And, you know, and they moved along very, very well. And so again, there were some said we had a small percentage who said they had unresolved technical issues. And then approximately 6% said that they actually had family members help them out. I would say that was a higher figure, to be honest. So challenges, you know, what sort of challenges did our learners have during this whole thing? And you know, missing the interaction of coming into class was that ticked the highest box. So you can see there 47%. And then we had another high percentage of learners who ended up having increased childcare or caring responsibilities. So again, that had a big impact. Another huge impact was isolation. A lot of people felt very isolated. What we did discover was that during this whole thing, that bringing back learning into keeping that continuity of learning, that had a huge positive impact on learners. It took their mind away, particularly in the very, very difficult weeks where everything seemed to be very doom and gloom. It really helped them focus on something slightly different, and it gave them an outlet outside the confines of their own home as well, a positive outlet. So that worked very, very well for learners. So yeah, so that was an interesting piece of feedback. The other thing, I suppose, there were a lot of learning points, and we are still learning as we're going along with this. We did realise that supports were absolutely necessary for learners, and because it was so isolating for people, you know, you had to sort of help them identify the supports they had in their own home. So again, they utilised the resources around them, utilised their partners or their children, and they got up and running that way. We would very much, I suppose, the other strong aspect for Longford Women's Inc., we work on an integrated model. So all the services link into each other, and we cross-refer clients between ourselves with their permission, obviously. But it means that as you know, for instance, the community employment scheme, a lot of our learners come from that area. So the CE supervisors, there are two in particular who stepped up and were absolutely brilliant and got everybody rolling along with it. And again, they supported their learners to make sure that they were very secure in what they were doing. Our tutors as well were absolutely brilliant. You know, it was a big learning curve for the tutors because suddenly they were used to having a very collaborative class, and then they were online, and it appeared to be very top-down learning, which is not the way we want to do things. So again, we had to learn how to tweak the class and change the class so that the learners got more involved. Now, the learners were happy throughout all of this, and they have all played their part. So the tutors and the other stakeholders were absolutely brilliant. I also think learners typically, had they been given the opportunity to move on to an online class, they probably wouldn't have gone online. It wouldn't be their normal way of thinking. But because of the circumstances, they ended up in this situation. And I think they're quite happy with them. One particular learner who thought she didn't have broadband in her home, and she emailed me to tell me this. And then I had a conversation with her, and I said, "How did you email me?" She goes, "I emailed you from my phone." And it turns out that she had broadband on her phone, so she was able to join the class that way. Now, we have quite a number of learners who are learning through their phones. We did discover as well that the laptops, and there was a lot of shared equipment within homes because there would be children there, and so the shared equipment wasn't getting you know, they were having to work with children, and different, said a lot of the equipment was getting used by a lot of resource within the home. So, but a lot of them, they ended up coming through their phone, and they were fine. But that particular learner, anyway, she joined via her phone, and I spoke to her a couple of weeks ago, and she said, you know, it's incredible what I have learned since I started doing this. She just couldn't believe the change. She's online banking, she's doing all sorts of different things now, so it has made a huge difference to their lives. We would also say manage the number of classes, and the reason for that is that we didn't want to overwhelm our learners, because they were typically coming in 2 nights a week, and we moved that to 1 night a week with online. So again, that worked out rather well. We also learned, again, that was the top-down thing, make it interesting and interactive for our learners. So we had to set up breakout groups, rooms and things like that, and I suppose create an environment where the learner felt more encouraged to participate in the class. Again, because you could end up with somebody being very quiet, and again, we would discover, we would encourage lots of discussion. The other thing was choose your modules carefully, and not all work well in the current situation. You know, we have had to shift things around a little bit. We have a lot of people who are working towards major awards in childcare, and again, those major awards, they have 8 modules to complete. So not all modules just at the moment are going to suit the online world, and particularly if they're not able to be in the work environment. And I suppose the other thing that we discovered was sometimes we might be inclined to put up barriers. We might have thought, oh, they won't have this, they won't have that, they won't have internet, they won't be able for this. And we just need to make sure that we make it all accessible for the learner, and that we give them the opportunities. And again, you know, thankfully we've had a great relationship with our learners, and our tutors have been brilliant. But our learners, trusted us, and they knew that we were going to make a decision that was going to be the right thing for them, and they went along with us. So you know, all of us, we've taken down barriers as well in this whole process, the digital barrier. So you know, it's been a big learning curve for everybody. The other thing then was, which was absolutely terrific for us, QQI decided that at the very beginning of this, that we could move that the classroom-based learners, which is what we are, and our quality assurance reflects that we could move, that all classroom-based providers could move online for continuation of courses, and that has proved terrific. And that was a brilliant decision that QQI made at the very beginning of this whole process. So we are, and I think we haven't totally made our mind up towards the end of the year, but I think we will avail of that right up to the end of the year. They've made that available to everybody right up to December. So I think we will continue to do that. Now, I have this wee survey that we did. I have a written version of it, and if you're interested, we can send that out through EPALE if you'd like to get a copy of it. So, thank you for your time, folks.
Thank you, Pamela, so much.
Thank you.
That was brilliant.
Okay, so, thank you.
I'm going to pass over to Alison. Before I do so, I just want to let you all know that in the control panel, especially if you're not familiar with GoTo, in the control panel, there is a little sideways triangle that has handouts, and on the handouts you can see the agenda, you can see all of your speakers' lovely faces, and you'll also be able to see the questions that are going to that we're reflecting on for the discussion. So please do go ahead and have a look at that. If you can't find it, send a message. And yes, take it away, Alison.
Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you can all hear me and, more importantly, see my screen. My name is Alison Blaney. I'm the Chief Executive of Kilcooley Women's Centre in Ards and North Down, and we're based in Bangor, which is about 10 miles from Belfast. It was very interesting to listen to Pamela because although we're approximately 140 miles apart, our experiences are remarkably similar. So just to give you a quick overview of what Kilcooley Women's Centre does, and in normal times, what we provide for the local community. We've been in operation for 25 years. This is our 25th anniversary. And we provide services to women, children and families in the Ards North Down region of Northern Ireland. So it's a population size of about 170,000. We do get a lot of service users coming from right across the county, because we are one of the only women's projects dedicated to women in the whole of the county, and certainly the only women's centre. We separate, as you can see from this service support map, we have quite a variety of different services that we offer. And again, like Longford, it's a very much integrated model where we cross-refer between projects to get wraparound support for women, children and families in the area. And again, like Pamela, we consider men to be members of the family, so there are specific programs that we can do to help support men, or we can certainly signpost onwards. So our main pillars of support we offer are education and training, employability and improving skills, health and well-being, peace and reconciliation and good relations, European programs, Erasmus Plus, Daphne, those type of schemes. We have dedicated childcare centres. We have 2 operational at the moment and a 3rd in development, because childcare is a major barrier for carers who want to engage in training and education. We have young women's projects, older women's projects, intergenerational, parent support programmes, And again, we lobby and network for gender equality and for women to be involved in decision-making processes, and taking particular reference to UN 1325 of women in post-conflict society. So if we look at what how COVID is impacting on us, what I had looked at is our different learning sectors, what we normally deliver when we're not in a pandemic, and what we can currently deliver during COVID, and what the impact that is having. So if we looked first at our accredited learning, again, we offer accredited learning with all the UK main awarding bodies, and that's from your basic maths and English right up until A levels. So at this time of the year, we would be in exam season, getting together everybody's portfolios ready for submission for accreditation purposes. During COVID, that hit just as we were about to move into exam season. We were caught up in the estimated grades system, and we had a lot of people who were just about to complete. So we had to work out how we could make sure that their whole year of learning up until March was not lost, because we didn't have a process in which we could quite easily flip that onto an online system. It wasn't easy because, as Pamela had suggested, not all courses were conducive to moving to totally online. And again, we offered childcare training. And if you have classroom or work placement parts of that, and schools had closed, so there's elements of classroom or childcare and our classroom assistant programme which we found difficult to conclude. And it was only with liaison through the awarding bodies to see how we could augment their evidence and use estimated grading, and so that no learning was lost and people achieved the qualifications they'd worked towards. The benefits and the of that had been where we were able to continue and support those learners. The difficulty where it's not everybody was equipped to cope with the switchover, and there was delays, etc. Vocational learning had to stop completely because it was very much practical and close contact based, so that couldn't transition to online. But what we are doing is we're preparing for our new cohort of learners where they do most of their theory elements online now, pending when we can get back to close contact practical works. It's almost rescheduling how we are going to deliver our learning. So the benefits are that we were going to retain our complement of learners during COVID. The difficulty is we were unable to deliver training in that sector for Q1 of the 2021 financial year, so that was April to June, whereas we would have had new financial year, new set of students coming in, trying to get some vocational learning, especially in the beauty industry. It also affected our classes like our conversational Spanish, and that was simply because we had to concentrate on the things that we absolutely had to complete. So Spanish has been put on hold, and our other languages, because it wasn't so much exam based, it was a conversational class, so we could pick that up at a later stage. Digital learning, our essential skills ICT, which we offer throughout the year, social media skills for older people. So we train a lot of older folk how to use Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and also FaceTime, things like that, so that they can not only keep abreast of information, because a lot of news media and things comes out through Twitter, and so that they can learn how to engage in those platforms. We're currently transitioning those models onto the online learning platform. Thankfully, most of our students in Essential Skills ICT and the social media cohort and the digital photography cohort had just completed in early March. So we were able to retain online training to complement face-to-face post-COVID. So what we have learnt, we will now keep on board. So where we were always very much a face-to-face based centre, what we have learned through transitioning those modules onto online platforms, we're going to retain that so that we can offer a blended approach for learners going forward. So when we come out of COVID, come out of crisis, there'll be an option. So people can either do online training or face-to-face learning. So that's one of the benefits we have found. And again, the difficulty was inability to offer new training for the first quarter of this financial year. So we had lost out on those students, and they'd lost out on their learning opportunities. Erasmus Plus programs, we currently have 4 Erasmus Plus programs. So during this last quarter, April to June, we would have been doing a lot of blended learning, taking some learners abroad on learning experiences, also a lot of online meetings with our partners. During COVID, we've had to flip everything onto online. We have maintained a lot of our work that we should have been doing in our face-to-face meetings. We've moved those on to online programs, and again, we explored a lot of platforms that we could have used, and we again, a bit like Longford, went with Zoom. Good cross-community and good relations is one of the casualties of COVID, because I suppose it does what it says in the tin. It's about peace building and good relations, and there's only so much you can do online. So we have postponed a lot of that. Where there had been training associated with our Peace 4 programs, where possible, we have completed them online, but no new programs have commenced. And the impact of that has been cross-community and good relation work really needs face-to-face contact. Online isn't really conducive for it. But we will retain some of the contacts we have made. So if we want to maybe increase what we're doing, so if we want to maybe set up some small working groups within our cross-community partnerships, now that we have done a little bit of it online, we probably wouldn't have done it online if we hadn't been in COVID, and we will retain some of that element. Health and wellbeing, we have a very active health and wellbeing programme, and that would be mostly for older people or people with mental health problems. We had a very active gardening club, Feel Good Friday programme, where a lot of people would have come into the centre face to face, got a lot of support, one-to-one mentoring. Again, we could have signposted across programmes in our centre and also to outside support. We would have had people come in to deal with some local problems, so we would have had local counsellors come in, engage with people face to face. Our arts and crafts weekly training programme and cookery, all very much interactive face to face. So we struggled how are we going to continue providing this support, because that would be some of our most vulnerable clients. How will we continue to support them during COVID? So thankfully we were able to use the skills within our staff team to create what we would have been doing, but by a video link really. So we have a very active gardening class, we have online yoga, we have an online friendship club, and that not only means that they have like an online coffee group every week, we have set up WhatsApp chat groups so that they can intercommunicate between themselves, and online cookery. And the benefits of that have been, we started our own YouTube channel. We'd been talking about it for a long time, so this kind of forced our hand to do it. So that will be a legacy where the YouTube channel, we're hoping, will then become monetized and maybe have a source of income for us. But not only that, it's that people can go back at their leisure and watch the yoga at a time that suits themselves. The drawback is many of these participants really do need one-to-one face-to-face support. So that was the drawback there. Personal development, again, a lot of the ethos of our programs are based around mentoring and coaching, especially for our young women's program. So to transition that to online, we didn't take on any new cohort clients. What we did, we continued on the support with the clients that we had, which again, we will retain some of this learning and keep the online additional support to complement face-to-face post-COVID. And the drawback was we were unable to offer new training for the quarter one of 2021, And that was simply due to we had to prioritise of doing that switchover, but we are now at the stage we are going to open our recruitment again very, very shortly. And lastly, employability skills. CV creation is very important element of our work, interview skills and providing assistance, clothing for interviews. This has been one of our great successes, because the CV creation has been astronomical in the success of it. I think in 1 week alone, we assisted 70 people into employment, where they had, mostly it was the hospitality industry had closed down, and we were able to assist those clients into a plan and securing new employment. And that was really done through online CV mentoring and online interview skills coaching. And again, post-COVID, we will retain this element and give a blend of opportunities to clients going forward. The only negative part was we were unable to support the clothing element of it, because it was just too difficult to manage. Our challenges generally have been our vulnerable clients. Web access isn't uniform right across the borough, and the ability to engage. They may have had broadband, but they just couldn't use it. They didn't have the skill set, and they also had issues with clients such as domestic violence clients. We would have a lot of women who would come in and use our service face to face, and people don't know that they're using our service because their partner or whatever doesn't know that they're coming. That's not the same if they're trying to do something online in the home, because it's quite evident of what they're engaged on. Disabled clients, early care leavers, and also migrants we find are having more difficulty accessing service. For ourselves, ICT limitations, the cost of software, for example, to upgrade to the professional cost of Zoom. Our website capacity to expand, to accommodate a lot of the things we now want to put online. We're finding our web platform as it stands isn't capable for it. So again, we're trying to fund that element of things. The process of flipping our training onto line was time consuming, and not all the staff had the skill set to do that consistently. So we had to take our time and do it properly and make sure there was compliance and all the things that we were doing. We very much find a digital divide. Those who have no hardware, or maybe only have access to the internet by a handset. And we find that in our Young Women's programme, because whilst we were trying to maintain their training, none of them had a tablet, none of them had a laptop, none of them had a desktop. The only thing they had to access was maybe an iPhone or a Samsung handset. So we had to source funding for them so that they could adequately access the programmes, because the hardware had to be appropriate for them to be able to learn from it. And then the pressure for device access. So if someone was providing homeschooling whilst the schools are closed, who takes priority if they only have one device? And it was often the children got it. So the learner was telling us, I would love to take part in that, but my son's using it for school at the moment. The ability to deliver face-to-face activity, for example, in our Erasmus mobility programmes, it kind of defeats a lot of the purpose of the Erasmus if you're doing everything online, because you miss the cultural aspect, the language opportunities, and some of the fundamental ethos of Erasmus. We also looked at the health and well-being of our staff, and the impact of COVID-19 on their mental health, their work-life balance and engagement with colleagues, and impact they felt on service provision to their own clients in separate projects. And the results of that have been, they're surprisingly resilient. However, as things have continued, they have got more and more challenging, where I think they're keen to see when they can come back into the office. And how we manage that will have to really be led by the advice from government. Online classes don't suit everyone, is what we've been told from clients. Face-to-face is preferable, and some don't want to know that other people that they're engaging. For example, it could be for domestic violence reasons. It's been a bit of a challenge to satisfy some of our funders. wanting constant updates, constant statistics. Whilst we're trying to keep staff and clients safe, it is a bit of a challenge. Continuing to plan for post-COVID-19 and putting new practices into place for future pandemics. This may not be the last time we're in this situation. It could just be called something different in future. And at this stage, we would usually be advertising and enrolling for September. So whilst we've been firefighting and trying to support clients through the current crisis, we also are doing a twin track where we're also looking for the autumn, and to make sure that we're not leaving ourselves or our clients behind by failing to plan. Personal engagement and supporting our service users would be our unique selling point. We don't really want to become an online centre, and we want that to be an additional to what we do, but not replace. And we have had a couple of conversations with funders where they think everything to move online is the direction of travel they would like to see things. And we're not a further education college. We're a community-based adult learning centre, and we need to make sure we retain that identity, because that's what sets us apart of being at that wraparound support. Home working isn't suitable for everyone, for staff now, size for in the home for the office. Tutor competence is not consistent. They're great. Some of them, whilst they're fantastic tutors, are reluctant to use camera or go on film, which you can understand. We can't just assume that tutors are just going to automatically become YouTube stars. Challenges in monitoring student progression, compliance and validity. So when we're doing things online, it is a bit of a challenge to make sure that we can stand over the assessment materials. Opportunities, expansion in the long term. We are going to embrace the online learning and the opportunities it's proposed. It's enabled us to raise the profile of what we do as more people turn to online platforms. It's forced our hand to look at new approaches and to remove barriers maybe that we didn't know exist, but our face-to-face presents. It's enabled us to develop new partnerships with smaller NGOs approaching us for assistance and build new relationships. We've been able to advocate greater support for isolated clients. For instance, that was the capital funding for the iPads and tablets, and it exposed the digital divide that we have. Cost savings. There's potential where we could save in delivery in the future by using online and digital methods. It's enabled us to put our resources online. All our HR has now gone online through necessity, and to embrace virtual meetings in the long term to be more cost effective, and enables engagement and removes barriers. So a lot of times some of our people we're engaging with are 40 miles away. And sometimes when you put the rural element into that, that could be maybe 2 or 3 hours if you get behind a tractor on a bad day. So our virtual meetings have actually improved, and again, we will embrace that and keep that going forward. So that's a quick overview of the impact and the benefits that we have found through the current crisis. I know that we'll move shortly to questions, and I'm happy to answer any questions or clarity anybody wants. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Alison. That was brilliant. So much to reflect on, for sure. So I think that leads us very nicely into our next poll. So if everyone could have a look at their screen and answer as fit, that'd be great. Perfect, nearly half voted now, almost there. Okay, almost. Last few seconds to vote. Brilliant. Thank you so much for that. So hopefully everyone can see the, can you actually type in the chat box if you can't see the results of the poll? Otherwise, I'm just going to think that you have. So it looks like 13% have felt that the biggest challenge is technological difficulties, 35% lack of resources, 9% communication, the winner digital proficiency, okay, and 4% other. So that's great, thank you. So now I'm going to just go ahead and put up the questions. So if you give me 1 second, hopefully you can see the questions there. And I'll just read them. Does the community sector have the necessary resources or expertise? Where is their good practice? Will the changes due to lockdown continue, or will we revert to previous methodologies? What of the loss of the social aspect of learning? Can this be replicated remotely? Will this shift further isolate the technologically disadvantaged? And so at this point, we'd like to open up for discussion. So I'm hoping that anyone who had any thoughts, any answers to any of these questions can use this time to go ahead and let us know. And you are welcome to, oh, sorry, I'm just seeing the, can you all see this screen okay?
No.
Can't see the screen. Okay. So bear with me 1 moment. It's the perfect workshop for digital challenges, because this is very much what we face in this climate. So let's, how about now?
Unmuted.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're up now.
Yeah, that's perfect.
Okay, so here are the questions, just so you can see them. They're also in that handout, but yes, we would love to open the discussion now. You are welcome to unmute yourself or to type into the chat box. Yeah.
Everybody's still showing on mute. I don't know, can they unmute themselves, Monica?
I believe so, but is there anyone who, let's see.
Oh no, Pat's just unmuted. Yeah, so a few people
Perfect.
can. Yeah.
Oh, great. Hi, Pat, would you like to share? Let's see.
I have a response on the third question.
Brilliant, thank you.
My name's Donna, and I work at Glasgow Women's Library, where a lot of the women that we work with are marginalised, vulnerable, and we work with them on a one-to-one basis. And I was really concerned at the start of lockdown that we wouldn't be able to support our learners, but we've actually been really successful in doing that and continuing to work with them on a one-to-one basis. Some of them via Zoom, via WhatsApp, some via their phone. Our biggest issue probably is the fact that quite a lot of our learners don't have the technology, so that's something that we're trying to source. Also, we don't have funding to do you know, to buy packages for learning with learners. All of ours is learner led, so we don't do courses, it's all individual. So we've been doing things like reading with the learners, doing creative writing, using anything that we can find online to work with them. And what I would find really beneficial is a sort of a list of resources that people have found or developed that can be used by organizations that don't have funding. And also, just to say that the question about the loss of the social aspect of learning, quite a lot of the learners that I work with have mental health issues which have been exacerbated by lockdown. But I have also found that I'm learning stuff about my learners that I might not necessarily have known. So for some people, it's actually been a really, really positive, lovely experience. But it's just sort of like a wide variety of things that we would never have thought of before.
Can I comment, if that's okay?
Of course.
Pamela. Yeah, no, I would agree with what you've said, and we were in a similar position in the sense that we don't have any funding either coming in, so we had to be very savvy about how we manage this. We had a slight advantage in the sense that I don't know if you're aware of, there's an organisation called An Chosán, and they have a branch, the Virtual Community College, An Chosán VCC. And we were they moved into the blended. They were one of the first community organisations to move into the blended area. So we were their first one of their first community partners on it, and our tutors and some of our learners were their first set of learners, including myself. So we went into that blended world, and for 100% out of it, the social aspect and the links that you have with the individual is so important. Their model is they have a day of face-to-face, then you move to the online element, and then you might have a day that you meet again as a group face-to-face in the middle or towards the end of the program. And we discovered doing that the learners who engaged on the 2 days face-to-face day, they were typically the learners who completed the course. So you would see the other learners sort of disappear throughout the course. And so it just really compounded that social aspect that that learning has for people, as well as the academic or the practical side of it. One of the reasons we chose Zoom as part of our platform, typically, you know, for our learners, it was free. So that was another aspect. And for our tutors, we didn't go, they have an education package. We didn't go with that. We went with the base package, which I think is €14 a month. And that's what our tutors are working with. And it's doing great. We can have breakout rooms and everything. Our environment, I don't know if it's going to be a long-term thing. We are re-engaging with QQI, so we would hope that when we engage, that we would bring the blended learning into our approach for the future. At the moment, they're allowing us work up until the end of the year using an online platform. But once the COVID restrictions are lifted, we're back to classroom-based. But there are huge advantages to both, and I think if we could manage a blended world going forward, I think it probably might be the best solution. But anyway, it remains to be seen.
Yeah, we will definitely be using a blended approach when we go back, because we have seen some real advantages about online learning. For example, for learners who just can't get out of the house, or other issues that keep them indoors, and it has been really positive in a lot of ways. We can't go back to our normal way of working because we work one-to-one, sitting next to learners to support them with their reading and writing. So that is an issue for us for this part of what we do.
We in part of our delivery, and it's all like that. We do a one-to-one in all of our courses with our tutor and our learner, and actually the feedback from the tutors in that the one-to-ones actually have proved to be extremely beneficial. They've worked out really well on Zoom, and partly it's because the session can be recorded, and the learner can go away at the end of the one-to-one and go back on that recording and, you know, in case they've missed something, or just refresh themselves. And that has proved that has proved for us to have been very beneficial. And it was sort of a surprise advantage that we got from it.
We find, it's Alison here, we find that our attendance rates for one sessions had improved dramatically, because we would have had one-to-one sessions set up for people either for one-to-one literacy, one-to-one mentoring or coaching, or just some social support. And a lot of times we would have had people who didn't turn up, or issues, life gets in the way and they just can't travel to come and see us. And we find that it's now the norm that more than less everybody attends, because it's online. They can be technically in their pajamas, you know, they don't have to get up, put their face on or whatever.
I would agree with that as well. Yeah.
I would. We have our learners come from all across Glasgow, and I think I've probably been seeing twice as many learners a week individually online than I have previously in person. So that is one of the benefits of it.
Okay, if I come in this.
Kirsty, yeah.
Of course.
It's Brian here from Co-RAIN, Northern Ireland. I found the presentations of Pamela and Alison very interesting, actually, and congratulations on a very interesting set of material. I'd like to just say a couple of things about particularly question 3 here that's come up. My view is that online digital learning is with us in the long term, and in theory, it can really improve access for people who are disadvantaged or who have disabilities, and I see all sorts of positive prospects there. But I would suggest to you there are certain risks, particularly in relation to what we mean by learning. Watching video clips is not actually learning. Printing out slides is not learning. Even memorizing content. In my view, learning has to include interaction and critical reflection, and being encouraged to verbalize ideas and also to raise challenges. And I think this requires educators, tutors, and I thought the 2 speakers brought this out very well in terms of blended learning, who are trained not just technically in relation to using the equipment, but to use online learning in an engaging way. And build in some form of learner contact and exchange with peer groups. And also have clear learning outcomes. And those learning outcomes should be accompanied by properly tested assessment methods, which confirm whether the learners have actually been able to achieve the learning outcomes or not. And just briefly to finish, one of the things that has come through in some work that we've been doing over the last couple of years by way of risk is it's very, very important to be aware of things like copyright issues, because copyright varies very considerably, and close regard should really be paid to requirements. Even a short unacknowledged quote or a video clip or use of somebody's lecture slides can actually be plagiarism. And with the best will in the world, that can happen very easily if you're trying to build up your online materials. So it's just a little caveat at the end there. But thanks very much to both speakers. I found it very interesting.
Perfect. Thank you for that. We have Suzanne and Kirsty with their hands up. Suzanne, would you like to?
Hi, thanks, Monica, and apologies, I haven't got the camera on. I don't know why. It doesn't seem to be coming on. And we use GoTo every day, but for some reason it's not working for me today. But really interesting presentations, and I work with AINTUS. It's the National Adult Education Organisation in Ireland, and I work a lot with Pamela and Longford Women's Inc. They're members of our community education network that I work with. And just some of the points I think it was Brian were making about critical reflection and incorporating that aspect of the work are really interesting, and they're of interest to the members of our network as well. And I think that those points are very connected to what Alison was saying about maintaining the identity, the community education identity, and I think that's going to be a huge challenge for the sector in the new world that we're facing, that if everything goes online, it's and hopefully it won't, but that a lot of the work will be online. How do we maintain that kind of identity and maintain that type of practice? And I think that one of the things that has come up for us a lot in the community education network is that the crisis has really highlighted the necessity of community education in building communities, in creating and supporting social cohesion, which has helped in terms of managing during the crisis and that kind of, I suppose, solidarity around responding to the crisis and staying home and so on. But it's also going to be really important in a post-COVID world in which there's going to be an even wider gap between those who engage in education and those who currently can't, because of I suppose, the technological gap and the digital divide, but also because there's going to be a recession following this, in which there's going to be a wider gap between rich and poor. And I think that in one way it's a huge challenge. It's also an opportunity, though, in terms of lobbying and promoting the value and the absolute importance of community-based education, which can't be just replaced with online provision. So that's what's been coming out quite strongly for us on the Community Ed Network.
Thank you so much for that. And we'll just have Kirsty, and then we will go ahead. So Kirsty, if you like, please. I'll just unmute you there, okay?
Okay, I think I'm now unmuted. That's great. Hi everyone, great to connect with you. My name's Kirsty. I work for the Community Learning and Development Standards Council Scotland. So we're the professional body for people who work or volunteer in community learning and development, which includes adult learning, youth work and community development. And one of our key functions is to provide and support professional learning for practitioners. So the whole shift to digital has been of real interest to us in terms of how we support practitioners to embrace that, and how we support them to access it. So I think that the poll regarding what are the biggest issues, I wanted to tick more than one, I have to say, because in some ways I think they're all interlinked. We have a real experience of practitioners with inconsistent access to different platforms. So with Zoom, for example, some local authorities in Scotland have been very adamant that their practitioners should not use Zoom for any kind of business related activity, and even have discouraged practitioners from using their own devices for Zoom sessions. But then we have other authority areas where they are positively promoting the use of Zoom. So there's a real inconsistency in terms of what practitioners are able to use. And I don't think that helps the practitioner confidence in their own skills then, because it might be that you have a practitioner who's quite confident in using a particular platform, but is unable to use that. And I think the other thing that practitioners are saying to us is, while they are, for the most part, keen to get involved in developing their skills, they're overwhelmed, I think, by the options and the length of time it takes to feel confident enough to share something with learners. So I think they're being quite hard on themselves in a lot of ways. But again, just to echo Donna's point about a kind of a list of resources that people have found useful for online learning would be really helpful, I think, and we'd certainly be interested in supporting that and getting involved if people wanted to try and pull that together.
Perfect. Yeah, that's all really good points, and again, a lot to reflect on. So thank you everyone for that. I am
on what Kirsty has just said, and one thing that I have sort of been looking at today as one thing that wasn't in my presentation, but I've sort of become aware of it today, is safeguarding online, and that's one thing that we all have to be mindful of, because we may have some young people who are under 18 and also some vulnerable adults, and once you get into webcams and digital learning, it opens a whole different minefield of safeguarding. Our risk assessment for when we start to provide a full service, that was the one thing that jumped out at me, was safeguarding is going to have to be totally overhauled regarding how we adopt our policy for going ahead online in the future.
Definitely. Perfect. Okay, thank you so much, Alison. So I just want to say, if anyone had a question in the question box, we will get to all of those in the Q&A. So at this point, I am going to go ahead and pass it on to David. Thank you, David.
No problem. I was having a great time.
Sorry, David, your audio is a little
listen to me for a few minutes.
choppy.
Okay, let me check that. Can you hear me now?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, yeah, perfect. I'm taking out my headphones. So yeah, sorry for interrupting the conversation, but feel free if anyone wants to jump in at any stage during this to have a chat. You're more than welcome, and hopefully we'll get through it quick so we can have maybe some questions. So again, what I'm going to do is I'm going to run through some of the things that I've experienced, give you a bit of a background on what I'm doing, and then see what people's thoughts are on it. So first and foremost, David, so I'm just going to ask, can everyone see screen at the moment? It should be blue. Monica, Nia, you might just give me a thumbs up on that.
Yes.
Perfect. Great stuff.
Yes.
Excellent. Okay.
Yes.
So I suppose I do a few different things, and I'm coming into this conversation with a few different hats. Some of those are as an educator. So I started as an adult educator with young adults with intellectual disabilities with the National Learning Network in Ireland, which is part of the Rehab Group, which supports people within different elements in care and in training and education. So about maybe 15,000 people in Ireland overall. And I now work with them as an innovation manager, so looking at new technologies and new processes and systems to support them to go through education and also to get out into the workforce as well. So it's really, really interesting, something I really enjoy. My background myself is actually as a construction worker, so I've gone through going back to education and going back to college myself. And I really think it's just such an important area that we all work in, because it gives us all a boost, you know, as students and educators as well. So part of what I do, I'll run through this really quickly so you can have a look and you can see what's going on. So this is Lisa. This is somebody that I've worked with within the Rehab Group, and we've supported her around creating spaces, inclusive spaces and environments that she can control using her eyes. So she can't use her arms and her legs, and she can't speak verbally. So in terms of trying to understand her needs, it was all about spending time with her and her carer and understanding what she needed within the space. And eventually it got to a stage where we had a setup where you can see there she has her iPad in front of her, and she was able to control that using a camera that tracked her pupils, and then that was able to read back to different devices, her TV and her lights in the room, and she was able to control it. But it taught me a lot about the importance of patience and really understanding people's needs within challenging situations. So it's something that definitely I suppose we have to keep in mind as we're trying to create solutions, that we're really listening to people, and it's good to part of my work then as well involves going around which are now online, promoting the value of people with disabilities in society as well. So we've gone to different places within that, run some workshops, and of course I did as well. So I teach up in Trinity, the National College of Ireland, and what I do there is around design thinking, so creating solutions to challenges, but also teaching teachers how to teach using technologies as well. So it was something that's been interesting to see. I suppose teachers who are coming on our courses, and before COVID hit, they were going through inquiry cycles, which I'll run through in a few minutes, and actually got to a point where during the middle of their course, suddenly COVID hit, and they'd been looking at new technologies to support learners before this, and it was interesting getting their feedback saying that it was, you know, perfect timing for them to have gone through a process like that, because they felt a little bit more prepared than they would have before that. And so it really kind of emphasised the need to support our instructors and our educators within the process as well, not just the learners themselves. And apart from that, we always are looking for support people. So I run a called Innovation, which looks at things like 3D printing, like this hand for this little girl, and working with some different companies, creating ventilators and things like that. Over the last few months, created a place where people for free, a non-profit, and people leaders and things like that. And we had adults, learners, and also people working in different spaces coming together. So it was a very interesting project to see people collaborating, and hopefully that's something as well we can start to bring into our educational spaces as well, this idea of old projects and collaborative works, and I think that's something that does well as well. So I'm going to look at 4 challenges within the space, and I'm going to run through some things quickly. And apologies if there's quite a lot here, but hopefully it'll be somewhat interesting to you. And one of the challenges that I want to look at is basically just finding out where we stand in a digital world and asking our educators, what does that look like? And I suppose one of the things that has come up so often is in the last little while is this idea of technology enhanced learning, and I think that's probably where people jump to initially, and they don't really think about what's involved within that. And the first step that is so crucial, and what we've seen even within the rehab group, is to really understand, like has been mentioned by Pamela before as well, that there's a need to understand, you know, where the learners sit within that, and the digital capabilities of the instructors as well, and what is the experience that we're trying to provide for our learners. And then we can build on that by adding in the technologies once we understand the needs first. And again, that goes back to Lisa, trying to understand needs before trying to create solutions for her. And then I suppose we can get to a point where we can look at technologies for assessment, for feedback and support. So, you know, going through this in a logical process. So one of the things that we can do to try and figure out where we are is to try and understand where we fit as digital citizens. And this is something that involves, we heard in the chat about things like, you know, copyright and plagiarism and all of that, but digital citizenship, you know, it encompasses all of that. And really what it is, you know, the safe, the savvy, and the ethical use of online resources. So how we behave and interact online, and that's for our students as well as our tutors to try and support them within that. And if you've got a pen and a piece of paper beside you, or if you've got your tablet or whatever you have, you can actually do this little kind of task, and it's to try and figure out where we sit with a piece of technology or with different technologies. It's a nice starting point. And with instructors who maybe are, trying to get a sense of who they are within a digital space, maybe people who are not so familiar with it, or people who are, you can do this. So a visitor and a resident will run through this. It's kind of I suppose, a spectrum of where you might fit with the different types of technology, and we'll see where people might come into this. And where you are in visitor mode over on the left-hand side, you'll see this as people who are coming online, and even within this conversation, this webinar, we have some people who have so far left no trace in the chat or in the questions. Maybe they've put in a poll result, which would be great. But there are people who, what we would say, are kind of lurking within these online spaces, who are watching, they're searching, they're finding out what's there, but they're not leaving any trace within that, no footprint there. And then on the far side, people who are very much in the resident space, so people who are leaving traces, so they're posting on social media, they're posting on maybe LinkedIn, sharing resources, putting up stuff, and really engaging with the conversation. So for example, I would say that Donna, who jumped on in that conversation, would be a resident of this platform, the GoToWebinar platform. And of course, within different technologies, if we look at it, we will fall, depending on the technology that we're going to look at, in one of these spaces. So that's that we can do. So here's just a quick look at what that might look like. So on the left, we've got our visitor, and on the right, we've got our resident. But then on the other axis, we also have personal and institutional. So basically what we use for work and what we use for home. And this is a really good thing to do with instructors, and even for ourselves, to kind of figure out, okay, well, what technologies are we using within our centres, within our classrooms, that our instructors are comfortable with, and how comfortable are they, and why do they use them? So for example, you might see over here, we've got Twitter, and within this one, we'll find that, okay, in my case, I'm a resident of Twitter, so I like to use some personal tweets, but mostly it's actually about work. So where it's going to fall within this space is over on the resident, and then down in institutional. But because I've got a few personal tweets, it just goes a little bit above that line and into the personal space as well. So if you want, over the even this evening, if you've got a pen and a piece of paper, you can draw out that access, visitor to resident and institutional to personal, and you can just start to note all the different technologies that you use and kind of find out, okay, well, where do I fit? And if you compare them with colleagues or peers, you might end up finding, well, they know something that I don't, or they use a platform in a different way. And that discussion and that engagement really starts to open up some ideas for people, where they can see, well, oh, I never even thought of using YouTube in a way that, engages students in a learning space, or whatever that might be. And maybe you're teaching literacy to students on Twitter because you've only got a certain amount of characters and you have to create a tweet for that. So that's something to be aware of. And if you're already comfortable with that, you've done that, you can stage with this, and you can start to look at self-assessment and reflection. And this is the Digicomp Edu check-in. It's a way that if you're a vocational trainer, or if you're an adult educator trainer, you can actually go on and you can see where you might stand within a kind of a self-reflective place within a digital environment. So the links are there, and I'll share those with you afterwards, so you can go on. It takes about maybe 15 minutes to do. It's free to download, and it's useful for both yourselves as educators, but actually sometimes with learners as see where they are. And what it looks like at the far side of it, after you've completed the different sections, is it will give you a bit of a score and show you where you feel that you're comfortable in, and also places that you can start to develop. So for example, professional engagement, that could be something that I feel quite comfortable using digital tools for that space. So for example, it might be for emails, it could be using Microsoft Teams. But actually then I might look and say, well, empowering my learners to engage with content, I'm struggling a bit there. I'm not too sure about some of the platforms that are out there, maybe like interactive quizzes like Kahoot or whatever that might be, or even with assessment. And assessment is an area that I suppose really comes to the fore when we're talking to funders and things like that. So it can be an area that we need to focus on. But you'll come out the far side of it, and you'll be able to see some of these different areas. And I think it's a nice little piece to be able to reflect on yourself as an educator and also manager within. And that's the questions look like this. So for example, which tools have you and your students already used for teaching and learning? and you'll be able to tick and click and a few things like that and get a sense of where you are. So this little tool, and if anyone wants, they can take a screen capture of that, or they can scan that code, and they can go and follow that afterwards. So the second challenge is, I suppose, filtering information and finding what's relevant. I think this is one of the trickiest things within this space. We've all kind of been thrown into it, and we hear all of the buzzwords, and we hear things that are very exciting, different platforms, Microsoft Teams for education, whatever it might be, Google for education. But a little bit like this, trying kind of like, where do I even start with it? So that can be, want to look through this, and this is something that we do with NCI, that we kind of look at the different tools themselves, and then part of it is, I suppose, looking at the needs as well and trying to map them across. But even as I was doing this, you've got, like on this one slide alone, it's packed full of different ideas and tools, and that's just listing them. And then within this, you've probably got 15 to 20 tools for each one of these particular areas, which can be quite crazy. So if people want afterwards, I'm happy to share an Excel file that has about 300 different tools, but they're broken down into these 13 areas, which might just help to start to, get a little bit through all of that online chaos that you'll see as well. So I'm happy to share that, and hopefully it'll be useful. And even within that, if we look at one thing in particular, which is, perhaps inclusion or collaboration, you've got loads of platforms. You've got things like Padlet, which allows you to be able to create boards online and connect in with. You've got PowerPoint accessibility, which now allows you to have, I suppose, feedback on if your PowerPoint presentations are accessible or not. You can also add in subtitles and translation within it, so that within PowerPoint itself, it's actually giving people who are listening to your presentations immediate translations that are there as well, which is really, really useful. And I think Microsoft Teams and some other platforms have started to add that in as well, which can be super useful for people who are deaf or hard of hearing, or even who don't speak English as their native language. You've also got loads of different apps for everything. So for example, you've got Microsoft Lens, which is a scanner, which means that at home, if you've got sheets of paper that you've brought from the office and you're like, okay, well, what am I going to do with this? I don't actually have a scanner here at home. You can download this app for free on your phone, take a picture of the sheet that's there, or if you've got whiteboards or whatever, and it'll automatically change it into a PDF for you, and you'll be able to send that and pass it up wherever you want to do. So it trims down the backgrounds, it takes it all out for you, and you can put that into OneNote, into a Word document, a PowerPoint file, whatever you want. But there are apps upon apps upon apps, and it can be very difficult to figure out what they are. So I think with the Excel file, it might just help to find those out. But one thing that I did like out of it all was this text-to-speech generator, and it's called robobraille.org. I actually think it was under Erasmus project, and you can test it out yourselves, and I really like it because it allows you to, if you're doing your work at home or if you're doing your cooking, because you're in your in your own space when you're delivering, and you want to just maybe do some cooking, but you still want to maybe read an article or whatever it is, or you want to give students an article in a format that is accessible. You can go onto robobraille.org, pop in the file, and it actually sends it into a MP3 audio option for you, and you can send it to your personal email, so everything is read out to you, which is quite nice. And there's a few more resources there. I'm aware of time, so I'm just going to keep ticking ahead with this. And the third challenge is finding a signpost. So we know that there's loads of tech out there, like even within that's a huge amount that we're seeing, even within 10 minutes there. And it can be a little bit overwhelming. So for instructors who are going on, they're like, well, I understand the needs of my classroom, my students or my learners. I need to engage them, but I know where I am, I know where I sit myself, but how do I do it? How do I put it into practice? part of what we need to do when we're thinking of our learning environment is to try and understand what are the learning outcomes, put in I suppose a sequence of activities that make sense, and then to people a framework to do it. And one of the things that we found really useful when we're working with further education instructors is to bring them through this experiential learning cycle. And we recommend maybe between 8 to 12 weeks if you're looking at one new technology that you're going to start to implement based on the need of your learner. So for example, we might say an interactive quiz like Kahoot, and we want to implement that, or we want to create or implement Microsoft Teams as a video platform, or if it's Zoom or whatever it might be, and we'll bring them through this. So first of all, they get to try it out, and then they reflect on that initial experience. Then they'll start to build on the experience that they understand and plan it into their current situation. So starting to again, like we mentioned before, flipping that classroom and getting it into an online environment, or bringing it into a blended space, and then reflecting and evaluating it. And I think if we can get our educators to a point where they're, I suppose, really engaged with this reflective practice, I think it'll be really beneficial as we beyond this. And one of the inquiry cycles that I think is particularly useful is this DADDIE model. So I usually start with, like, let's talk about DADDIE. So it's DADDIE. And it starts with identifying the learning outcomes. And then we move in, so we usually spend 2 weeks on each one of these, and we bring people through the process, and at the end they come up with a poster. So we start with saying, well, what are the learning outcomes you want to achieve? And what are the needs and expectations? So what are some of the constraints that you may have? Maybe it's broadband, maybe it's that they don't have laptops and they're only using phones. And then we'll design the course structure and assessment based around the needs that they have, and the technology that we want to put in. We'll develop out some of the resources, which get some feedback from your peers, and then we put it into practice in the context itself. So there's about 8 weeks prior to actually putting it into practice that we try and support someone to go about it before evaluating to see, was the learning outcome, for example, engagement or attention or whatever it might be, was achieved. And what it looks like, the templates that we use with NCI, is that it ends up in a one-page poster, which can be shared with colleagues online, or it can be put up in your centre, and it brings it all the way through from the definition stage at the top, all the way through to your evaluation and reflection piece. And what we found is that by bringing people through this process and having something like this out the far side of it, people have found it, first of all, it's good for their own reflective practices, but it gives them a good structure of going, okay, well, I know what I want to achieve. I know I've identified the needs. I understand the tool that I want to try and use, but I don't know how to go about it. And it gives them this signpost, this way of going through it step by step to go, okay, let's break this down, and it kind of takes the fear out of it a little bit. And what we will do is we'll do online webinars with people, whether it's within, I do it maybe within the National Learning Network that I work with, or we'll do it with instructors who are coming on courses. And by bringing them through this, we found that the initial stage is quite difficult because it's an unusual, I suppose, way to do it. And it really, by the end of it, and once they get to the implementation stage, we found that the reflective pieces have been really interesting in terms of feeding back around confidence of, not being afraid to break something, not being afraid to use a tech and try it out, and the engagement that they have by involving the learners within the process. So the fact that the learners are part of this process to say, well, look, we're going to, as an educator, I'm going through a learning process, this inquiry cycle, but I want you to be part of that. And it gets people on board, but also having this as a resource at the end to share with colleagues and peers who want to maybe replicate it. If you've got a colleague who maybe teaches a similar course in somewhere else in the country, they can actually have a look at this in a one-page format and can follow it through. Stuff around social media use and digital citizenship and how to engage, but maybe I'll just share those with you because I think that's quite a lot, and I just might open up Monica, Nia. I think that's probably where we'll end it for now, and if anyone wants to ask any questions or connect in with me, you're more than welcome to do that, and we can maybe even jump on a call after this, over the next few weeks, and I can run you through what this process might look like.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Sorry, I'm having an echo there. But okay, I will just go ahead and pass it on to Joe. And thank you again, David, so much.
Unmute. Are you seeing me?
Yes.
Oh, good. That's fine. I expected there to be a couple of questions, so you just caught me a little bit by surprise there. But, right, let me shut everybody down. Okay, well, I wear 3 hats. David said he wears a number of hats as well. I'm a little bit the same. I run a master's program at the Smurfit Business School in Dublin, but I also wear a consulting hat. So when I'm not teaching at university, I do a couple of days a week teaching, consulting, and that tends to be, training, management consulting, coaching, both in the for-profit but also in the non-profit sector. And when I'm not doing that or playing with the kids, I also run a photography business. So I wanted to talk about, just for a few minutes today, this idea of moving online across these 3 spaces, in terms of what we've all faced recently. So 3 completely separate strands of primarily adult education, which mostly were delivered in person until COVID-19 struck in March. And I've kind of structured it in 2 halves for each of these. So the challenges and then kind of how I've reacted or made these approaches. So I mean, quickly on the university one, because I know that's not this particular space that most of you are in. Classes of 15 to 50 students drawn from all over the world. We're a top 50 business school in the world, so high quality standards and teaching. We're relatively lucky that the student base that we have is well equipped, has access to the internet, they all have a laptop and all that kind of stuff. So that kind of stuff doesn't really affect us, certainly when they're at college with us here in Smurfit. It certainly affected us when they went home. So the scattering back home introduced immediate challenges for us, both in terms of our own ability to pivot, but also from a student perspective. I mean, fear, uncertainty about the learning environment, uncertainty about, their health and their life and whether they were still going to get a good learning experience and whether they'd still be able to pass all their modules and all this kind of stuff. My students ended up all over the world. I had people, the week after the kids came home from school, I had students dialing in from South America, from China, from India, from Australia. Not all of them had access to the internet. One of my Indian students had to go next to the next door neighbor, who was a rich, relatively rich next door neighbor who allowed him to use the internet for the 2 hours of the class that I'd scheduled 3 times a week, so that he could access the internet. And I think we all have faced a challenge around our own capabilities and our own self-belief as teachers. As I've shared my, if you like, feelings of challenge around that with various teachers, both at university and elsewhere. I don't think there's a teacher that I've talked to who said that they've not been challenged by this. So one of the approaches that I've adopted across all 3 of my separate cohorts, not just the university one, and it goes back to what David was just saying about the daddy model. Ask students what they want, ask them what they need. I've taught design thinking. I was in product design for many years, and voice of the customer is this fundamental when you are producing anything, whether it's a product or a service for anybody. So I just went back to those fundamentals. Okay, guys, we're in a new world. You're now learning online. What do you need? What do you want? What are you hoping for? And when you put that question out, you then have to be prepared to hear the answer and to change. So I adjusted my college delivery from 3-hour sessions down to 2-hour kind of basic Zoom sessions. And we did a lot of interaction within those Zoom sessions. So shorter sessions, and then open sessions afterwards for general chat and catch up. David just finished off his talk and said, please contact me outside. We'll pick up afterwards or whatever. And that's really important, that you make space and you make it okay for people to do that, because in a co-located environment, you walk out the room to the coffee bar or whatever, and a few people catch up with you and they say, oh, I just wanted to ask you something or whatever. They can't do that online. We have to send each other an email and set up a Zoom call, or set up a phone call or whatever it is. So making those connection points available and making it okay to set those connections up is something that you have to be more proactive about. One of the things that I've done throughout the last 3 or 4 months is that I've actively created a set of online resources, and all the online resources that I've created, down in the bottom left-hand corner there, that's my kind of consulting website, and all the resources that I've created are free and downloadable if you go to Houghton Consulting. So that forced me to become educated in certain areas of doing stuff online and all this kind of stuff. And then by having to put those into, either a one-pager or a short document or whatever, it forced me to clarify my thought and communicate it in a way that hopefully, has been of benefit to other people. And I've got some nice feedback from some of that stuff. The other thing, and I suppose it's what I try and be as a teacher anyway, is you've got to be ultra responsive to student questions and requests, because most of the time they will come through asynchronous means like email or text or messenger or whatever it is. And basically I've just lived in those spaces for the last 4 months. And as soon as questions come in from students, I'm back to them. Okay, I might not have the answer straight away, but I'm back to them. I'm saying, I hear you. Okay. And either here's the answer, or here's what you should do, or let's set up a call for the next day or so and have that discussion. In the management consulting space, and this does now start to move into the space of where Monica Nia and the rest of the organisers set this webinar up, because a lot of my consulting is done with non-profit organisations, with charities and community groups and stuff like that. Everything in person just was initially cancelled, wasn't it? And there's been quite a slow restart, and some of that is challenge of knowing how to get into the online space. Some of it is funding, and we heard from the first 2 speakers today, funding is a challenge, and it's especially a challenge in the non-commercial space, although it for a lot of commercial companies, it's also a challenge. So there seems to be a clear need for training. I mean, there's 40 odd people on the call at the moment, and there were more when we started. So there's obviously a need for sharing of this information. And, I think it was a great suggestion that was made for us to create some kind of a, list of available resources for companies and non-profits and community groups as well. I'm getting quite a lot of demand from my consulting business now for project management, because I run a master's in project management. So a lot of people are saying, well, how do we do projects when we can't get together physically? How do we do projects and manage teams at distance, whether those are at distance, within a town, or whether those are at distance, across the world. Because basically once you're at distance, it doesn't matter whether it's 100 yards or whether it's 10,000 miles. you're still communicating electronically. So, you know, the good online content, publishing, sharing, making good online content around things like remote operations, teaching and learning available, taking part in webinars like these, creating material like this, and I'm involved in at the moment creating a couple of sessions. I'm delivering a session on kind of storytelling and remote teaching and learning for EPALE in, I think it's September, Monica Nia. Not sure what the dates are for that yet, but
yes, September.
Yeah, so that kind of stuff. When I first became aware of EPALE in 2 or 3 months ago, Monica Nia actually reached out to me, and since then I've uploaded some stuff into the resources section. I've written one community story around this area, so if you just look me up on the community stories, you'll see that, and there's another one going up in the next week or so, which was a reflection on my first fully online teaching module. Being proactive, I think, we all need to help each other. There are some people who are feeling very challenged. There are other people who perhaps are less challenged and have certain skill sets that they can offer to others. And I'm trying to be as supportive in terms of being proactive and supportive to as many different people as I can at the moment, and being responsive. One of the key things about online, whether it's teaching, whether it's any kind of online, is I'm finding face-to-face really good. Now, I'll come up today. I've got 7 hours of Zoom calls in the diary for today. So this is the second of our 2 hours, and this I've got 3 more hours of Zoom calls after we finish today. It can be tiring talking to a screen, talking to camera and stuff. It's far less tiring when you're actually talking to a face on the other side. So I'm finding that the using the conference calls both maintains but also helps establish relationships. And I was very surprised at the way I've managed to create relationships with cohorts of people that I've been training, in the non-profit and the for-profit space, as well as the university space, on Zoom calls when I've never actually physically met them. So you can do this, you just have to make a bit more of an effort, and you have to kind of like ask people to turn on their video, and give some time to chit chat at the beginning of a session rather than just jumping straight in. Okay, so again, coming back to voice of the customer, bespoke customization of courses. Online is different to in person. So you may need to customize the courses. You'll certainly need to customize the way you deliver material. Use of things like breakout rooms, use of things like Jamboard, and I think David mentioned Kahoot, or somebody did earlier on. These are really, really useful tools to promote interaction for people who are going to be sitting on a Zoom call for, it might be an hour, or it might be, most of a day if you've got a whole training course or whatever. And whether that's training or whether that's coaching, it can certainly be done. I mean, I spent the summer in South Africa 3 years ago when my wife's mother was really sick, and we were there for 3 months, and I did a day of coaching for one of the big retail stores here in Dublin. While I was there in South Africa, I just set up Skype calls and did an hour's coaching with each of their senior managers once a day, and it worked a treat. So this stuff is very doable, but you have to bring yourself to a new way of doing, if you like. And there's a fear that we all have to get over those barriers. And I'm going to talk about camera clubs now. So there's that page on my website with some of those resources, and you can just click on these. These are all PDF files, and you can just pull those down from this website here. So one of the things that I do a lot of, and I probably do 2 or 3 talks in the evening to camera clubs, and many of these camera clubs are older people, and for some of them, this is their primary social contact during the week. And overnight, they stopped with COVID. So we were not going to get any, photo walks. We were not going to get any club nights in the local village hall where a speaker would come and talk for a couple of hours on some aspect of photography, as well as all the, the loss of, being able to go out and shoot. So again, kind of my entrepreneurial streak kicked in. So the Thursday night, the kids came home from school and they weren't going back. Friday, I spent most of the day and I went through every Irish Camera Club on the internet, and I created a little database of all their contact details, and I emailed them. And I said, we're going to be in lockdown for a few months. We're not going to be able to meet. So why don't we do online Zoom club nights? And we can, I can deliver a talk on X and Y and Z, and we can do judging. People can submit their photos electronically, all the rest of it. And this was ahead of the curve. This was while everybody else was kind of thinking, oh, we've got a couple of days off, before it had actually sunk in that we weren't going to be able to meet for 3 or 4 months. Okay. And that's been brilliant, because immediately I got a dozen requests. And over the next few weeks, I spent a good chunk of that next 2 weeks sitting on the phone or on Zoom with club secretaries, with various, people from various clubs all around the country. And then it spread into the UK and Ireland, and also into South Africa, where I used to be a member of a club there, to just show them. So, I'd set a Zoom call up and I'd show them the ropes. And once they'd seen it, once they'd got it, the light would dawn. And then the fear kind of went away a bit. And it's helped a lot of clubs maintain contact for all their members. And again, somebody mentioned earlier on that they've had very good engagement with the online training and the online learning. And what I've typically seen with many of the clubs that I've been, giving talks to and helping get set up, is they're actually having quite a significant number more people dial in each week on the club's Zoom night than they had coming into the club. If you had to go out in the cold and the rain to go to Palmerstown to sit in the clubhouse or whatever it was. So in terms of building community, in terms of keeping people together, and in terms of allowing people together who could not otherwise be together. 5:30, I'm doing a 2-hour session for the club in South Africa, where I'm just going to spend a couple of hours and edit some photos, and it's going to be like, an editing tutorial. But 3 weeks ago, these guys hadn't actually seen each other for 2 months. And I reached out to the club secretary down there and I said, I presume you're on Zoom talks, aren't you? And they said, no, we're not. And I said, well, why not? Let me show you. So we set one up on the Saturday, and the following Wednesday we did the first club night, and we got the second one tonight. This stuff is doable, but you need somebody to show people the way. But I mean, it's led to, I've got an invitation to go and tour Scotland once the lockdown eases, and run workshops and stuff like that. So kind of key takeaways for just to me to finish off, because I know we're kind of pretty close to time. Identify the challenges of your customer group, whether that's your staff, whether that's your customers, whether that's your clients or the people that you provide a service to, or whatever it is, and ask them, what are their pain points? Don't assume you know. Ask them what they want, ask them what they need, and then listen. Because you've got to listen. You've got to be prepared to change your approach, because the old doesn't necessarily work, and it may well not work. So you've got to be prepared to take on new tools and techniques, which means being open to talking to colleagues, talking to other people, reaching out through things like this webinar, and EPALE and whatever, and saying, Does anybody else out there know this? Could anybody else give me a hand? Because chances are, if you stick your hand up and say, can anybody give me a hand, somebody will come and give you a hand. You've got to be entrepreneurial, because again, just sitting doing the same thing isn't going to work. So some new will be needed, but just try it. Yeah, put stuff out there, fail fast, fail forward, you know, and if it doesn't work, try something different. Social media is fantastic because it allows you to connect to so many people. So, you know, use social media to both ask questions, but also to share your own knowledge and, you know, and pass it forward, and be really, really reactive and empathetic to everybody at the moment, because whether you project capability and calm and all this stuff or not, everybody is feeling challenged. Everybody is feeling at times that they don't know what they're doing, and, you know, will anybody figure that out? So I found that being supportive to my colleagues and the people around me has helped me as well, because, you know, I've had bad days as well. And I think everybody every now and then is having a bad day, especially with all this stuff. So if you fail, so what? You learn either way. So that is me done.
Thank you so much, Joe. Brilliant. So I am, can you all see my screen okay there?
Yeah.
Brilliant. So we have a Q&A that we can stick around, because I do know we're coming close to time. So if you do have any questions after we end, you can stick around. Before you go, in case you do need to head off right now, little meme for you. These memes are running the world right now, and when you find one that's funny and relevant, I like to share it. But I want to let you all know, Joe mentioned this brilliantly. The Community Stories is an initiative that EPALE is launching. There has been some incredible stories so far from all of the EPALE EU countries involved, and there's going to be an ebook that's published at the end of this year, seeing how dramatic and transformative 2020 has been so far, and it's only June. It is going to be really interesting to see this ebook at the end of the year. So we invite you all to share your story about developing innovative online teaching, distance e-learning, anything that really you have to share from this year, really. And of course, for all that have not registered, please do so. We definitely invite you. You're very welcome. And I hope that you all, I mean, there's been amazing questions, amazing discussion. So I hope that you all will share your thoughts by way of a blog on EPALE, just that this is the way that we truly connect. So here is my colleagues. Rafna can be contacted EPALE UK at ecoris.com. Myself, Monika Nia, can be contacted via EPALE at lergas.ie. And thank you so much. And as always, don't stop being active, especially on EPALE.